Hello and welcome everybody to today's post daily news update. My name is Wai Ting. I will be steering the ship today as we give John some time off. He will be back with me tonight to cover AEW Dynamite on Rewind Dynamite live at 10:05 p.m. Eastern right here on youtube.com/postwrestling and available, of course, on all of your feeds after the fact. But joining me to talk about today's news, headlines, and everything else that's going on. Pleasure to welcome back Bruce Lord. Welcome, Bruce.
Happy to be here again, Wai. Thanks for having me back. I apparently haven't yet worn out my welcome. I'm still counting down the days, but happy to be able to talk about the business of the day with you.
To the contrary, I would say some very rave reviews about your prior appearances on these post daily news updates. I'm excited because it's the first time we get to talk about the news together. So, and there's quite a bit of it. Starting off here, let's dive right in with the XFL. Yes, letters that just never seem to fade in our world, at least. The XFL at the Disney upfronts yesterday announced a 5-year, multi-year broadcast agreement with Disney and ESPN. They're making it official. They have formed, here, let me just read it here. We are making it official. We formed a multi-year agreement with Walt Disney Company and ESPN, who will have exclusive broadcast rights for all 2023 to 2027 game day content, tentpole events, and more. Each season's 43 games will be aired and streamed across ABC, ESPN, and FX. And of course, those who will remember the story is that in this presentation was The Rock. Dwayne Johnson himself with Danny Garcia. The XFL was purchased by a group consisting of Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, and Jerry Cardenale's Redbird Capital in August of 2020. This, of course, followed the XFL's filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy following a brief restart that was cut short due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is also perhaps worthwhile to note that, of course, former owner and Vince McMahon himself is no longer affiliated with the company, although he is still tied up in a wrongful termination lawsuit with former league commissioner Oliver Luck. So looks like two different sides of the coin with regards to the XFL here. Bruce Lord, I don't know if you're a football fan at all, if this means anything to you as a fellow Canadian, but what are your thoughts on this?
I am not a football fan, I have to admit. I am one of those people who did sort of out of morbid curiosity, turn into the very first XFL game back in the original incarnation, with JR on commentary and whatnot, just to sort of see what it would actually look like, kind of at the peak of, Attitude Era hubris. I guess, third time is a charm here. The fact that this is a brand that is, I think at this point, has been ridiculed so thoroughly here and there in general popular culture. There was a Simpsons reference about it years back. I myself picked up, at a liquidation warehouse, just a XFL branded jersey just to have as a bit of weird wrestling ephemera. The fact that it is still back, I mean, one, if nothing else, it speaks, I think, to the enduring popularity, of our future president, Dwayne Johnson. Just get used to it, people. But also, I mean, really, realistically, this all just, comes back to the point, that yourselves and specifically Brandon Thurston have always been making, which is that, look, live sports are absolutely king in the current environment. And I think there are still some folks who maybe aren't really connected to or pay as much attention to, quote, real live sports within the wrestling world, who just don't understand how much money television rights fees for live sports are completely driving the media landscape, are now, things that streaming entities are having to take account for. And so even something that, again, might seem like the butt of a bad stand-up comedy routine from 15 years ago is still being viewed as a financially viable option for some very, very large media entities here. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you're a sporting league, if it gets much larger than the combination of ABC, the network itself, and also ESPN. And like you said, for as much as I think we have joked and the world has joked about the XFL, there's nothing to joke about when it comes to how big of an impact it seems like The Rock himself is able to make. And it's an interesting question to ask. Like, if it was not Dwayne Johnson attached to this, it was just another money person, would they be able to rehab this brand in such a one quick swoop? Just a little quote here from the press release from Dwayne Johnson himself, who says, "This is a definitive moment for the XFL and the beginning of an incredible long-term partnership for the league, building on my long-standing, very successful legacy relationship I've had with Disney throughout my career. We're excited to be working with global visionaries that are aligned with the XFL's values, are true team players, and share our ambitious goals to grow the XFL as a global sports and entertainment business. Through the combined power of Disney, ESPN, and the XFL, together we will create a new powerhouse on the sports calendar and bring a dynamic game of football to fans everywhere. Time to ball out." Is that the new phrase? Is that the new? Do you smell what the rock is cooking?
it's the it might. I can't believe he didn't work in a plug for the tequila in there at the end. But I mean, the fact that he's so comfortable with that sort of verbiage, right, speaks to the ways in which, maybe in part, that's part of the reason why he has that clout that you're referring to, right? Is that as his kind of global, far bigger than wrestling star has risen, he's been able to really adapt to those waters in a way that we have seen, people like, Paul Levesque, and certainly, I mean, you compare this language to the way in which, Stephanie McMahon often speaks about, getting branding partnerships and being able to integrate this, these things into the WWE and whatnot. Those are apparently skills that seem to actually be really recognized or needed by people who are seeking to sort of be something more than just the face or the actual on-screen talent. And if he is going to be something more than just sort of a figurehead owner kind of in absentia or whatever, that's what will be expected of him. And I mean, look, I'm not a business analyst, but he seems to be talking the talk from my perspective.
The fact that he already has whatever investors he has on board, and the fact that he has the trust of a major networks here in this conglomerate, it goes to really show the power of this man within this industry. He's got a show about himself on NBC. He's still, I mean, he's in a big Warner Brothers movie coming out. He's still got a big Hollywood career. He's got deals with Under Armour. The man really honestly has taken over the world, and this football league just seems to be the next step. So we'll follow up on that as the story progresses. Raw ratings. Now, this is going to be a really interesting one for several reasons. I think the first of which is the fact that, of course, there was no NBA and NHL competition for the first time in several weeks here. So, of course, this meant that Raw saw an increase here. 1,736,000 viewers overall, which is up 5% from the previous week, and a 0.45 in the demo, which is up 2% from the previous week. This according to WrestleNomics and Showbuzz Daily. This ranked Raw number one in the demo among cable originals, tapping the competition by a significant margin, which included Below Deck Sailing and Better Call Saul. Now, I don't think it comes to anybody's surprise that Raw would be number one. What I do think is interesting and fascinating is that for the 10 p.m. hour, Raw was actually the highest rated program in the demo in all of television, which included network programming here. So, Bruce, I guess I wanted to ask you, is this the countdown to Cody effect? Or was it some of the hysteria coming off of the buzz online about what was going on with Sasha and Naomi? What do you think?
Speaking as somebody who very, very, very rarely, falls off the wagon and will actually, deign to switch Raw on Monday. I have to admit, I was in a lengthy work meeting, and so I didn't even begin to hear about all of the drama until I got home a couple of hours after Raw had ended. But if I had been on Twitter and had heard about the whole, incredible scenario that was playing out backstage and on camera and on, the WWE's press releases, I probably would have tuned in just to see, in almost a car crash sort of way, how they would react to this, and how the performers who certainly in the main event slot are having to adapt and react to something as significant of a change as this in the moment. There's a real sort of we talk about how there's never anything announced, ahead of time for Raw. Like, tune in tomorrow where so and so will speak or something like that, and you have no idea what you're getting. If in the moment there is something as dramatic as this real life walkout playing out, I can absolutely see a bunch of people texting each other, hearing about it on Twitter, and deciding to turn it on, like as I alluded to, I would have. And then the Cody thing, I don't think can be underestimated as well. The analysis that Brandon and other people have been doing, and as excuse me, as you guys have pointed out, the actual handling of him right now still seems to be very much in keeping with as big of a WWE push as can really be afforded to anybody who isn't Roman right now. So they've been keeping him strong enough to be able to justify, that sort of a bump for him as well.
I think the countdown, the Cody clock, whatever you want to call it, is definitely here to stay. Like, they have found, I think, somebody who they've made. I don't know if made is the right word, but I should say presented as a draw to hook viewers on for the 10 o'clock hour. For whatever reason, it seems to work at least 2 weeks in. So I think it's here to stay, and we'll see, how they play with it next week as our 10 o'clock champion, Cody Rhodes here. More important, of course, as Roman Reigns might be taking a bit of an absence, and you have a lack of championships on the show. So those are your Raw ratings, everybody. The latest update on the rumored, well, not at this point, the Ric Flair return match happening at Starrcade in a few weeks' time. Of course, there were reports that were out there that seem to have been confirmed that Ricky Steamboat, at least at one point, was considered for the role. And we know this because Ricky Steamboat himself has turned down the offer, publicly stating. He did a recent signing at High Spots, and during the autograph signing actually said, and this comes to us from Fightful, well, I was approached and I gave it some really serious thought. A lot of respect to the guy in the ring. Both of us are night and day when it comes to stuff out of the ring. Flair wouldn't be Flair without it. I thought about it for a week and just recently declined on it. I know when I wrestled Jericho at WrestleMania 25, then we had the return match at Backlash in a singles, but at 69, and I know it's a six-man tag and I can get a little this and a little that in, but with all due respect for our fans, I want them to remember me the last time I was in there with Jericho when they chanted, "You still got it." I don't want to scar that phrase. So, seemingly confirming at least plans that were proposed to him that it would be some sort of six-man tag, and also the fact that he was approached to it. But yeah, what do you think, Bruce? Ricky Steamboat opting to leave the memories alone.
It's a very, classy and dignified response from Steamboat. He doesn't necessarily go out of his way. He certainly isn't burying Rick or anything like that. But in that article, he does say, both of us are night and day when it comes to stuff outside of the ring. And that's the understatement of the century, certainly. It was also nice to, in talking about his health issues there, that he doesn't really have any, and contrary to what Jake might have intimated, is doing fine. And he looked good when he showed up to kind of host a recent MLW show. I'm one of these people who is not going to be tuning into this. As you guys were talking about, I believe it was on Monday when this was announced, the fact that it's Triller booking this, is kind of perfect, right? It very much matches up with the whole, freak show like element that it will probably draw and attract. Obviously, if as is rumored, you have folks like the Rock and Roll Express and FTR possibly being mentioned as participants in that. I think obviously those are all talents who have a great deal of love, respect, and affinity for Flair, and would be wanting to help him out and present him in as possible best a possible light as could be done. But it's just one of those things where the whole marketing of it does seem a little bit crass and ghoulish. There's the medical concerns that you guys were talking about. There is the fact that if we're being really blunt here, Flair's financial issues are very well known and documented at this point. So the fact that this is just another attempt to try to keep the taxman or the collector at bay, I think is something that can't help but be present in the back of your head, right? And even if I was the sort of person who had grown up through the entirety of Flair's legendary runs and seen him and whatever, I just don't know that I would want to see him in this shape a couple of years after very nearly passing away in what just seems to be a very, again, kind of crass commercial maneuver here.
Yeah. The temperature, with regards to this one match comeback from Flair, is going to be interesting to continue to see, because I've been seeing more negativity than positivity attached to it, and I think people wanting more wrestlers to be like a Ricky Steamboat,
Yeah.
to step away from the spotlight when it's presented to them, just for the sake of maintaining a legacy, for instance. And Ric Flair, we know, is somebody who's had a lot of difficulties maintaining that. And but all that said, the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that I think it is Ric Flair, there will be plenty of people that I think will be interested in this. And Starrcast is looking to be really completely centered around Flair, because outside of this return match, Conrad Thompson and Ric Flair himself have announced a reunion of the Horsemen here. Conrad Thompson tweeting out that we have another stage show announced for Starrcast event. We will have this group of Horsemen consisting of, it looks like here, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, Lex Luger, nicely photoshopped here in the background here, Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, and J.J. Dillon together on stage for the first time and for the last time. The Horsemen reunite for one last ride. This will be a photo op, and it looks like a panel discussion here. So this is taking place Saturday, July 30th at the Nashville Flair Grounds, as Ric Flair himself has stated. So it looks to be a bit of a very nostalgic weekend. If you're a Ric Flair and a Horseman fan, this just gives you some extra incentive. We don't know who else is going to be a part of this match, of course. Can you see it being any of the people who can actually wrestle?
I think Arn could absolutely, of these guys, in a 6-man tag, I'm sure you could do, just have, Arn come in and do a quick spot and spine buster. He's done some limited physicality outside of the ring. In terms of the other guys, I don't know. I mean, we've seen Tully do a couple of quick spots on AEW here and there. So, that's not entirely beyond the pale. I was a little bit surprised to see that Ole wasn't involved in this. I don't know if there's been any mention of his sort of condition or whatever over the last few years, but
yeah, I'm guessing he's not making too many public appearances, especially for Horseman related material. So that is the latest about Ric Flair at Starrcast, everybody. On the other side of the pond here, we have another big show that seems to be getting a bit of attention here, and that is Wrestling Entertainment Series, put on by the former Authors of Pain. They recently announced a show that is taking place here. I have the date here, June 4th, in the Motorpoint Arena in Nottingham, England. And this, I guess, recently made headlines because the card was announced yesterday, and it is essentially a card almost entirely made of former, recently released WWE talent. And I say almost because the headlining match itself is a main event featuring Adam Scherr, the former Braun Strowman, taking on Alistair Overeem. In a
of course, why not? Why not?
In his professional wrestling debut. This, I don't know what to think. I didn't know there was any sort of craving for an Alistair Overeem professional wrestling career. I should also note that, this is also interesting because Alistair Overeem has been pretty outspoken about professional wrestling in the past. And there's a quote here from a former MMA Hour interview that he was on, where he was, I guess, had a chance to talk about CM Punk and Brock Lesnar entering the UFC. And he had this to say about professional wrestling at the time. He says, and recently I started looking again on YouTube, speaking about wrestling, and oh my God, this stuff is lame. It's just lame what these guys are doing. It's fake. It's lame. It's stupid. And then it's, homophobic slur there. He says it doesn't make any sense. It's lame. It's not even a sport. It's just lame. It's bad acting. It's just lame. I'm sorry for all the fans of WWE, but I'm just being honest. I'm just giving my opinion. Free country, right? I think it's lame, and because I hadn't seen it for 20 years, I never watched Brock fight. I never watched CM Punk fight. I knew they were from WWE. So that is your headliner, everybody, for Wrestling Entertainment Series. Maybe they'll play that up. Here's the outsider who thinks this stuff is really lame. who's freely uses homophobic slurs in describing it, even taking on Adam Scherr. Let's go through the rest of the card before I get some of your thoughts, Bruce, because our co-main event for the Women's World Championship, we have Lena Fanen, the former Nia Jax, taking on CJ Perry, the former Lana here. And then for the World Tag Team Championships, we have now dubbed the Legion of Pain, of course, formerly the Authors of Pain, taking on Wesley Blake and Steve Macklin here. And then also to round out the card, Killer Cross versus Samurai Del Sol versus Jonah, Madison Rayne and Tennille Dashwood versus Deonna Purrazzo and Chelsea Green, Dean Mutati, the former what was his name, Mojo Rawley, thank you, taking on Lince Dorado, Mike Bennett versus Biff Busick, and Dirty Dango, the former Fandango, taking on Luis Valenzuela Jr., the former No Way Jose. Your thoughts on this show?
What a odd assemblage of, I mean, without meaning to be disparaging here, 80 or 90% of these people are, I think, any prospective viewer or audience member of this show is going to be reading this as, just people from the last year and a half's worth of WWE cuts and releases. I don't think there's anything else, any other way of sort of parsing 90% of these people, if not, I mean, I'd have to go through a checklist here, and we could get into a discussion as to whether or not, people who were booked but are signed but never actually made television or whatever. But that's what we're looking at here. And to be frank, it's a real range of talent as well, right? Like the fact that that is the only thing that kind of unites these people, I think brings into sharp relief how just different the contrast is in terms of, again, trying to be charitable here, the broader wrestling fandom and community's interest in some of these folks, or interest in at least seeing them in a in-ring capacity, right? And there's a real gulf of differences between those, right? Between on one hand, somebody like Busick, who I thought, just did a killer job of getting his name back out there and raising his stock, over Mania weekend, to somebody like Samurai Del Sol, who I really liked before and during his WWE run, but has been relatively absent. And I'd be very, very curious to sort of see him kind of anywhere at this point. Over to, I mean, I think we can kind of connect the dots here. Some people whose in-ring work, even when they were in the WWE, in front of theoretically, more forgiving audiences, was not especially looked at terribly well. And you just have to think are going to be sort of viewed as kind of, in a very different way than the Flair thing, but there's almost sort of this like rubbernecking, what is this going to look like? Or how are these people going to put a match together? I think that's kind of has to be read as part of the reason for some of these bookings, or at least these pairings.
Yeah, this I believe will be the first in-ring wrestling matches that Nia Jax and Lana have had. I believe maybe that goes for Mojo Rawley as well, since their releases. This is being advertised as live on pay-per-view, so I'm not exactly sure what sort of pay-per-view it intends to be, but we will probably get a bit more information. I mean, when we're talking about a roster of former WWE guys, they're all relative names that are going to be known. And I think it will strike a decent amount of interest. Will it strike enough interest to justify these ticket prices? Because they're certainly charging, like it's a WWE or an AEW level show here, with prices ranging from £30 to you can buy meet and greet tickets for £320. So they are definitely charging as if this is still very much a nationally broadcasted brand. And I believe they said something about hoping to expand throughout the rest of Europe and the Middle East as well. So, we'll see if this takes off, and we'll see what sort of audience it garners.
I mean, the fact that, there is the other entity featuring a lot of, less than welcomed with open arms ex-WWE talent that are trying to sort of, make their own way. I mean, again, we've sort of seen what the reaction to that has been, and that is still very much having difficulty finding an audience or getting on its feet. So the fact that some whole other entity, which obviously isn't using the same, very guerrilla or edgy marketing tactics as that other entity, I think that, from an outsider's perspective, that very much looks like kind of overextending yourself. But
And over on to NXT now. NXT, as reported here first at postwrestling.com, they have confirmed their dates for Florida, for their Florida house show. So NXT 2.0 is going back onto the road with several dates announced. And basically they include the Coconut Loop, or what's commonly known like as the Florida Loop here, with dates going from June 10th to July 23rd, ranging all the way from Tampa, Florida to Cocoa, Florida. NXT is back on the road, as they announced last night on NXT 2.0. Any thoughts about NXT's return, Bruce?
As a lot of dedicated Post and WrestleNomics listeners will know, Brandon Thurston and Jesse Collins recently had some really good discussions of NXT, and specifically the kind of function and evaluation of the Performance Center in terms of has it been able to do what it claims to be able to do in terms of directly generating stars who are going to go right to your Monday and Friday night shows and produce ratings and everything like that. The fact that is a line that is still being touted, and there's the whole NIL program and all of these sorts of things. The fact that this is a return to live touring that is happening right at the time when the fact that NXT is being openly discussed as a developmental, right? If I'm remembering correctly, the last time I was here for one of these news spots, one of the talking points was that Hunter was just referring to it as a developmental league and comparing it to AAA baseball. This is all very telling. I think I was chatting with Chris Ely on Twitter a couple of months ago about how the fact that you have people who are theoretically meant to be going onto a touring brand in either Raw or SmackDown, even with, as we've seen, the more I think forgiving audiences who are beginning to kind of make up the majority of WWE live shows. You are doing so many of these talents that you've scouted and hired and are theoretically putting up in your incredibly well-heeled Performance Center. You're doing them a terrible disservice by putting their second, third, fourth, fifth ever organized matches that they have ever had on a national network. These are people who are, if there is to be any future for them, are in desperate need of the sort of seasoning that I think we've seen, that only performing in front of live crowds and different live crowds can offer. So, it's a smart move, I think, in the short term, to get these people just a little bit, of comfort and familiarity with being to work out there. Again, there's the whole other question of whether the USA is happy with this whole idea of NXT as a developmental. But if it is, this is a good step. And having some of these people's missteps or learning experiences happening in front of a non-televised live audience, is only going to help them, is only going to protect them, is only going to keep, somebody like a Lash Legend or whoever it is from being overexposed. I was making the analogy when I was speaking with Chris about, I'm a DJ and I write about music a lot. And so I often have people sending me, demos or whatever it is. And you try to be, constructively critical here. But often one of the worst things, artists can do is just putting out very, very unpolished raw material onto streaming services or onto Bandcamp or whatever it is. And if they're not putting their best foot forward, that just, that just serves to make a terrible first impression. And I feel like that's kind of what's been happening to a lot of current NXT talent. So yeah, regardless of what we think about, NXT as a ratings mover or as, part of, the WWE's broader television portfolio, if it is going to be a developmental, if it isn't just going to be trying to grab your Johnny Garganos and whoever else who don't need any in-ring seasoning, it's a very smart move.
I think there's a lot of value to, having a broadcast platform for talents that are in NXT. Specifically, though, maybe talents that are maybe on the just on the cusp of being main roster ready. And hopefully with this move back to live touring, it creates another uh, element of depth to NXT, where you can put somebody's first time match on a live show in front of a live audience, but not being broadcast.
Yeah.
While after maybe several tours where they're actually ready, then you maybe graduate them to television, and then eventually, of course, to the main roster. So hopefully, this makes it into that much more of an effective tool to build talent. I think we're getting at the point now with NXT 2.0 where I think a lot of people's disappointment over the death of the black and gold sort of philosophy has kind of waned, and people are accepting that NXT 2.0 is perhaps a more effective tool in achieving their goals of developing talent and bringing them directly from the same vision on the main from NXT to the main roster. And on that, let's talk a little bit, or at least I'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights from last night's NXT 2.0. Of course, this saw the continuation of the Women's Breakout Tournament, and it saw. Here, I got some results here. Roxanne Perez advanced. She will take on Roxanne Perez and Lash Legend, both advancing. They will take on each other in the semifinals. And then also, of course, Nikita Lyons versus Fallon Henley is on the other side. They've also announced the showed a little vignette here for Thea Hale, whose to-do list includes, number one, graduating high school next week, and then eventually taking over the NXT Women's Division. So
She's got the Nick Wayne contract, I guess.
goodness, like we're getting to the point now where like I'm talking about wrestlers that are debuting that are half my age, people that like this woman would have been born when like before Randy Orton like made his debut, or after, I mean, I should say Randy Orton made his WWE debut. That's insane to me.
Making Julia Hart just look like that, grizzled,
Oh yes.
FCW, vet or whatever it is at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, we also have, of course, it's been made official. Joe Gacy will get a rematch against Braun Breaker for the NXT Championship, but this time it will be okay. If Braun Breaker gets disqualified, he will lose the NXT Championship. And I should remind everybody that Joe Gacy lost the match the first time around to Braun Breaker. So how this stipulation? Anyway, so Braun Breaker has to hold himself back from getting DQ'd, otherwise he will lose the championship. That is the main event of NXT In Your House. And I believe right now the updated card also sees Pretty Deadly taking on the Creed Brothers, and also Cameron Grimes versus Carmelo Hayes. Last night we had, of course, I believe a tag team match between Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams taking on Cameron Grimes and Solo Sikoa. Maybe interesting of note is that it was Solo Sikoa who got the pinfall over Carmelo Hayes, the person challenging for the championship here. So whatever's happening there, I mean, they're still clearly keeping Solo Sikoa in the focus, in particular for that North American Championship, with the crowd screaming, "You got next" afterwards. So already setting that up. We also have, what else we got? Viking Raiders got their win back over the Creed Brothers. So Creed Brothers are challenging for the Tag Team Championships, but I guess this was just a way to, 50-50 book the Viking Raiders' brief appearance in NXT, continuing that little rift they have with Roderick Strong, who kind of cost them the match. And also next week we have Duke Hudson versus Braun Breaker, and also Mandy Rose versus Indy Hartwell in matches. So that's your latest update on NXT 2.0. For a full review, check out our friends at Up Next, of course. Let's go to a bit of an update about the Best of the Super Juniors, Bruce. You had a chance to check out some of the tournament matches from night 3. Any thoughts?
Yeah, in general, I think that this has been a pretty enjoyable tournament thus far. I'll just quickly run through the results of the tournament matches from today. You had Yo defeating Clark Connors, Ace Austin defeating Yoshinobu Kanemaru, Alex Zane defeating Sho, Taiji Ichimori defeating Ryusuke Taguchi, and Hiromu Takahashi, I think understandably and predictably, defeating Francesca Akira. I've only been able to see the kind of the top 3 of those matches, all very enjoyable. A little bit of your House of Torture shenanigans with Sho, but once that's out of the way, a pretty enjoyable face showing from Zayn, who I think, just the literal colorfulness of his outfit and personality and his moveset is working in pretty well with the usual New Japan Junior mix, and a really, really good turn from Akira in the main event here. Like, obviously, yes, it's a Best of the Super Juniors main event, but it's still, it's a New Japan main event spot. And I thought he and Hiromu synced up very, very well together. A lot of kind of, standing switches and kind of, suplex counter spots that I thought had a lot of good fluidity to them. Hiromu gave him a lot. And I think, Akira really kind of endeared himself to a crowd that I have to imagine isn't super, super familiar with him, understanding the way that All Japan and New Japan fandoms are often kind of separate from one another in Japan. So yeah, I don't know that match was quite as good as the previous, the Eagles one from last night. But on the whole, this has just been a pretty easy to watch and enjoyable tournament. It doesn't quite feel like the slog that a lot of recent New Japan tournaments have been. And yeah, it's still clap crowds, but I think it's just the fact that, there's a little bit of fresh blood in here. There are storylines happening even outside of the junior division in New Japan that I think are just, they're not the biggest stories in the world. The Bullet Club War isn't completely, overtaking the wrestling world right now, but it just sort of feels like things are in motion for the first time in New Japan rather than just treading water. And the fact that, you've been able to have talent popping over, from American companies over to New Japan, and, obviously Japanese talents making appearances in North America. It just sort of feels like we have a little bit more of the fluid and active mix that obviously New Japan was always part of before the pandemic, and now with the very, very open relationships with AEW and Impact and other entities. It just, I'm not saying that we're totally over the hump or anything like that, or like we're back to, the glory golden days of 5 years ago or anything like that. But, I let's just say I don't sort of approach these cards as like, the job that I have to put in. Like, okay, let's put some coffee on and just get through this before my day. It's something that I'm actually looking forward to sitting down and enjoying now.
It feels like the brand is healing, and this is of course combined with I think recent positive reviews to their American shows and all the activity that's going on here. Forbidden Door, of course, I think is bound to be a week of great rehabbing again for the New Japan product and the brand. And I think to me it'll really culminate and heat up once the G1 comes around and they announce that roster. If it's anything like the best of the Super Juniors, I mean you're going to be potentially talking about a pretty attractive roster heading into the rest of the year for New Japan. And hopefully eventually these crowds are able to make noise again, and we can just have the G1 that I think we've been lacking in recent years. So thank you for that update, Bruce.
Oh, happy to.
The last thing we have to talk about is tonight's AEW Dynamite. It is Wild Card Wednesday. I suppose this, you can consider it a headlining match. We have Hangman Page taking on Konosuke Takeshita with special guest commentator CM Punk. Takeshita, this will be his first Dynamite appearance. He appeared on Rampage recently as well, but complete unknown, I would say, to the Dynamite audience if you're just watching that, and more so, I would say, a showcase match. I would say online, I think this has gotten a lot of buzz because everybody seems to know what Takeshita is able to present, and I'm sure on commentary they will do a very good job of putting him over here. This is, of course, a show that is deemed the Wild Card Wednesday because we have the two Joker matches taking place between Samoa Joe and the Joker in that first round match. And then we also have Britt Baker versus whichever Joker is there. This is also coupled with Kyle O'Reilly versus Rey Fenix in another opening round match. And then, somewhat confusingly, but whatever, a second round match is also taking place on this show between Adam Cole and Jeff Hardy. Any thoughts on any of these tournament matches and who the Jokers may be?
In terms of the Jokers, I'll just deal with that because everybody's got their pet theories, and at a point you got to lock in your predictions, right? And so we're, whatever it is, 8 hours away from airtime or something. I would love for the men's Joker to be Claudio Castagnoli, but I have my suspicions that it will probably be Miro, and I'd be perfectly happy with that. Excuse me. And I think that, Maki Ito is probably a smart bet for on the women's side. Obviously, there is the possibility of, the couples, the Joker couple coming in. I guess, I don't know, Joker and Harley Quinn in this terrible analogy or something, with the possibility of, Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae coming in. It's very intriguing. I think there's a slight difficulty there in that if, say LeRae comes out first as the women's Joker, I think everybody's going to be expecting Gargano in the men's spot, and does that sort of diminish the surprise? I don't know. As we've seen with Punk, sometimes a surprise is coming still pays off very well. So I don't think that's a lock, but it's a very interesting possibility there.
I guess I question if she would even be in like ready shape. It still feels like, I mean, a newborn is no joke to have to take care of.
How
So
long ago
like,
was that? I don't remember at this point.
I wouldn't have. It wouldn't. It was this year, right?
Was it? Okay, maybe,
I
yeah,
believe
maybe,
so.
maybe not
Yeah.
then. Yeah, yeah.
I think February actually.
Okay, yeah, okay,
probably
okay.
way too soon.
Yeah, that is probably too soon then. Yeah, but there's a lot of other, interesting stuff on this card, specifically to the point about Takeshita. There was an incident that I don't know I saw anybody comment on in the match with Lethal, where he had done some, incredible move to the outside, and he and Lethal crashed into the guardrail, and the camera that was on them picked up this guy, this fan in the front row, just going, "Who is this guy? Who is he?" Just agog at how polished, Takeshita is. I think, when we've seen things like, Uemura or, Shooter Umino and guys like that, who are still very much kind of in the young boy excursion sort of phase. I think that that's maybe a certain level of polish and a level of presentation that maybe folks are used to when they have, a young wrestler from Japan who's coming over here and just kind of messing around for a few months. Takeshita is not that. He's been placed as the ace of a small to medium sized, but a functioning company in Japan for a long while. He exactly knows what he's doing. I think he is played to the positions and roles that he has been put in AEW, in that Lethal match and a handful of others, very, very well. So yeah, so even if this is, probably going to be, it's not going to be a huge ratings draw or whatever, and obviously the program itself is trading on the Punk Page dynamic to really carry this segment. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how people who maybe didn't watch that Rampage match, who are seeing Takeshita for the first time, will react to him. O'Reilly Phoenix should be a really interesting pairing as well, given the difference in styles there. And I checked this and confirmed that, yeah, this is a first-time singles pairing. They were in a tag match, between Red Dragon and the Lucha Brothers back in 2017. But as as guys who are often placed within, tag matches, but that I'm always happy to see in a singles context, that could be really, really hot and really, really exciting. Very, very much looking forward to that one.
Same here, absolutely. Of course, we also have Adam Cole versus Jeff Hardy. This comes just a week after that Darby Allin Jeff Hardy match, so we shall see what condition the man is. My prediction is that Adam Cole will likely be moving on to the rest of the tournament. So we'll see what kind of. I mean, they can use that up to this to play into the story of the match. Here's Jeff Hardy, who just went through one of the most. Brutal matches I think we've seen on TV.
If nothing else, just to do him and Darby the solid of not allowing that match to just sort of fade into the memory hole immediately. I mean, you and I and a lot of people on Twitter and whatnot are still talking about it. The GIFs are around, the debates as to degrees of comfort, comparisons with other spots. Like, it's very much sparked off that sort of conversation. And if they want to do right by that, if they want to do right by, for better or for worse, what those guys were able to do and laid out on television for you last week, yes, I think absolutely this should be, the story being that, Hardy can still, somewhat go, and maybe he can, just eke out a win over, the younger version of himself in Darby, but that these matches will take a toll on him. And a week after is not enough time to recover, to be able to really bring it to somebody like Cole, or to defeat somebody like Cole.
As a fellow GIF man, put a smile on my face to hear you pronounce it that way.
Oh, geez. That's the pineapple on pizza, the hot dog sandwich debate. I
It will
tune
be
out of that one.
it will be debated forever. Wardlow must take 10 lashes as well on this show, so that's going to be a pretty interesting, memorable segment, I should probably say. And then Jericho and Regal will have a face-to-face confrontation. So all of that will be happening tonight. You guys can join us back here at 10:05 p.m. as John and I review the show. And before we get out of here, Bruce, would you like to go through some super chats with us?
Sure, let's go.
Speaking of Chris from LA, our mutual friend of ours, he sends a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Professor. He says, Braun Breaker losing the belt by DQ would be a throwback to the Steiners losing the tag belts to the Quebecers by DQ. Interesting. Okay. Would be a way of getting the belt off of Braun Breaker. Absolutely. A very unsatisfying one. Now, we have already done the Breaker brief run, loss, and regaining. Unless this was actually their way of moving him up to the main roster. And if that was the case, I don't know why. I wouldn't say Joe Casey would be the person I think he would do that with. I hate the idea of like Braun losing the championship again. You're gonna make this guy a 3-time NXT champion in the span of like what 2-3 months. It's a bit much, and I think it just kind of kills what is already, I think, a lessened legacy now with this NXT 2.0 brand attached to that championship. So
I think the question here is really what they've indicated, and obviously with the recent NXT cuts, that there is a very short leash, and it is a throw you in the deep end, sink or swim sort of scenario. But I still don't know that we've really gotten a sense of what the actual proposed or planned timeline for somebody like Breaker that they obviously are very high on and have obviously placed in a really prominent position, at least within NXT. I don't know that we yet have a handle as to how long they exactly expect projects like him to sort of percolate and brew in NXT before getting the call up. It could be as short as this, or we could be looking at 9-10 months a year or something. So yeah, it's one of these issues about the format change to NXT that I still think we're kind of waiting on.
And one last super chat here comes to us from Jake, who says, "Thank you so much for the support, Jake." He says, "You guys gonna check out these media upfronts?" I don't know if I'll be checking out the upfronts themselves, but of course I'll be checking out some of the highlights. As we know, it's shown right here. AEW, here's Red Velvet Prime Center as a focal part of the Warner Media presentation that's set to take place. Actually, it's supposed to have just taken place. I personally couldn't find much information about it in particular with AEW, just in doing my quick research for this show itself. But if there are any notable points, we will be discussing it, I'm sure, tomorrow on the Post Daily News Update, or even tonight on Rowena Dynamite. I don't know if you have any thoughts about any of this.
I mean, if nothing else, it's interesting, I think, to see how the broader Turner umbrella is going to be positioning AEW, both in terms of how they're evaluating it when the TV contracts come up for renewal, but also with something like the looming replacement project for Roads to the Top, right? Which we are still a little bit fuzzy on. We still don't have a sense as to what degree that will be the same sort of Total Divas style scripted reality show that Roads to the Top was. Excuse me, Roads to the Top, not Roads to the Front. Or is it going to be something that is a little bit more, I think, of interest to the existing wrestling audience, or that could begin to kind of work in the way that a certain F1 property has worked in terms of hooking in people who may become more fascinated by the quote actual real drama that goes into the production of a show like AEW. There's also the fact to consider that, again, as Brandon has been pointing out, there has been some interesting appearances of AEW talent on non-Turner television and non-Turner properties. So, if nothing else, I'd be keen to get other media analysts' thoughts on, kind of reading the tea leaves and coming to an understanding through something like the upfronts as to where the current relationship between Turner and AEW is beginning to tilt right now.
I'd be curious to see if AEW gets that mainstream press at all, because like as far as like these Warner upfronts go, I mean there's a whole lot more going on with that entire company and their merger with Discovery and everything that might dominate the headlines above something like an AEW announcement. So
Hmm.
we shall see. We'll be talking about it all throughout the week if there are any notable elements. Bruce, you have been great as always. I could see why the world was welcoming you back in with open arms, of course. And I hope to get to have you on one of these again in the future. Where can people find more of you?
I'm like I always like to say, I hope I'm a relatively light follow on Twitter at Contrasoma. That's CONTRASOMA. I also run a website and podcast with my friend and partner Alex, dedicated to covering goth and industrial music. The website is idiudi.com, and our podcast is called We Have a Technical. And again, as I think I mentioned the last time I was on here, if you scroll all the way back to episode 400, you might hear a certain Wai Ting making a little appearance. Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, that's me. It's very niche stuff, but if any of those genres are of interest to you, that's idiudi.com and the We Have a Technical podcast.
There's a more of a pro wrestling / industrial music crossover than I think you could imagine, Bruce.
I mean, I wore a whole bunch of wrestling tees to the music festival that I was kind of emceeing over this past weekend. I was up on stage and introducing bands and whatnot, and I had some of my kind of like Suzuki, streetwear sort of shirts and things of that ilk. And at least a handful of people, including, a couple of folks in bands, were sort of just like, oh yeah, nice piece there and everything. So yeah, it comes up quite regularly. You'd be surprised.
And again, congratulations on the recent 400th episode. It
Oh,
was a
thanks.
pleasure for me to guest on it. And what Bruce had me listen to a song that of an artist that is considered legendary in those circles, but I have never heard of before. And I gave my unfiltered thoughts, and I kind of panned it, and
And it
I've
was wonderful. It was wonderful to hear your thoughts, Wade.
I've kind of since had people be like, "Man, it was I can't believe Way said that about like." Sorry, was it Skinny Puppy?
It's Skinny Puppy. If you are at all interested, I think in checking them out further, for me, their LP Too Dark Park is the one of the foundational electro-industrial records, and it's just a dense, noisy nightmare of a record that is so rich and cluttered and vibrant. And it's a relatively short listen as well, but it'll leave a mark on you. So if you are interested in digging further away, yeah, Too Dark Park.
A great broadcaster, always welcome on these shows. Thank you so much for joining us, Bruce. And as I mentioned, you guys can join me tonight with John Pollock returning here for Rewind to Dynamite. And until then, we will talk to you later. Bye.